Come join me in my creative space where we can paint, learn, and have a few laughs. So get comfy and let's get started. Hi everybody, Kat here. Thanks for joining me today. Before we get started painting this adorable, soft, fluffy kitty, I wanted to show you a little trick that I use with my masking fluid very quickly here. So it comes in a package like this. It's called fluid. It's a fluid writer, and there's a little opening right here for you to put ink and things like that. So what I will do is put my Pebeo drawing gum. Is very liquidy, and so I'm going to put a little bit in there, and I'm going to show you how thin I can get these lines. I'm going to zoom in and I'll show you. So I'm using a little eyedropper that you can get at any craft store, and I'm putting one tiny little drop in here, and then we'll do it. So I'm going to zoom in. This comes with a little pin. So to start it, I will put the pin in here. Whoopsie. If I can see it. Small things are lovely when you can see them. So I tried on my finger first. See, it's coming out. So I'm going to put a few whiskers on this little kitty. And they're nice and thin, and you can do them long, you can do them short. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who's ever found this, but I just found it at my art store and I'm just thrilled. You can get it at Jackson's Art Supply. And there we have it. Look at wispy thin, I'm sorry. Okay, let me do that again. Wispy thin whiskers. Just like that. I'll be including a sketch, but to transfer this drawing, I used watercolor crayons on top of the drawing, and then when I transfer it over, I just use the least amount of lines as possible. When I transfer it over, it's very faint and there's no pencil lines, which I like. I start out here by thoroughly wetting the background, and I mixed some brown with some jaune brillant, and I made like a light creamy color, and I'm just putting it in where all the darks are. Now this little cat drew my attention because of the little diamond shape coloring he has in his face, and then her paws and her ears, and it just looks so soft and fluffy, and it just drew my attention. And it's from a photographer called Becky Matum, and she's from Facebook. It's a Facebook group, Free Reference Photos for Artists. You should check them out if you ever want to have some, to get some ideas, and you can use their photos, and then I think you might have to post them back to their Facebook page. I'm not sure, I'll have to read the rules again. So I'm adding in some indigo into that brown. It's still on the warm side, but throughout this painting, I alternate between the warm, so the browner parts of the spectrum, and then I add more indigo, and it becomes grayer, so that's cooler. And this cat is quite gray, and it's not. I'm not attempting to completely replicate this photo. My challenge is to keep it nice and soft and see if I can capture those eyes. They're quite stunning, those eyes. I haven't painted animals for a long while, and I used to paint them all the time. So I can't just keep painting flowers. It doesn't stimulate me, and I don't want to lose what I've learned throughout the years painting animals, and I feel like I have. It's not quite like riding a bike. It's, you lose the muscle memory almost, and your instincts, you know, what works, what doesn't work. And so I think I'm going to have to do this more often. This is a fun brush, great for grasses and fur textures, and it is so cheap. I will try and find where I got it from, and if I do, I'll put it in the description below. So this whole painting, I had a list of the paints I used, the colors, in the beginning of the video, and the whole painting is done with a mixture of indigo, brown, burnt sienna, and jaune brilliant, pretty much. So you don't have to be too precise. You just have to make sure that you have a nice mixture of warm colors and cool colors, because cool colors work best for shadows. So for example, the eyes are recessed a little bit, and that's what makes the nose look like it's sticking out. So you would use a cool color for that, ideally. Sometimes you can do it with warm colors, but I have better luck if I use my cool colors for shadows and recessed areas, and warm colors when I want things to come forward in the painting. And I'm really trying not to have too many hard lines in this painting, because when you're painting, well, anything really, but I find with humans and animals, you really can get caught up in the details. And I don't want to do that. I really want to keep this nice and soft. I'm curious if you paint animals, if you try to paint your pet, or if you have a friend that asks you to paint because you like to paint. If you do, you should really focus not so much on the color, but on the proportions of the face. That is what makes a person look unique from another person, and the same with a pet. It's the distance between the eyes. It's not just the color of the eyes, it's where they're placed on the face, how close they are to the nose, and how close the mouth is to the nose, and etc. Now here, this is the painting I did without masking fluid. So you notice I'm drawing that darker paint into the cat's white fur. So it looks like the white fur is on top of the dark fur. And I do it throughout. I do it later in the ears, and you'll see when I add the pink in the ears, you'll see that. Trying to keep everything soft, everything. So when I let a layer dry, I re-wet it again, or I use extremely wet paint and soften all the edges. And it's starting to look a little bit like a raccoon. And a little ghostly. You can't start with the eyes, and the reason is because they will often bleed into your painting, and you don't, because they're normally quite dark, and you don't want that to happen. But at some point you have to get at least your first layer of color in, because it does look ghostly like this, and it starts to get a little scary to paint it. So I'm alternating between the warm brown and the cooler grays, keeping everything nice and wet. And now you can see that's a pretty thick consistency, but because it's wet, it's going on wet paper, those stripes are softening out, and that's exactly what I want to happen. But if you put them down and they're not softening out, you dampen your brush and you go on either side, and you soften them out manually. But wet on wet painting is a little bit unpredictable, but it's also so fun. That's what watercolor does. It almost paints for you sometimes. Oh, okay, here I'm doing the ears. And that is light pink with the Jaune Brillant. Just mixed a light color. And then with a deeper version of that same color, I'm going around hairs that aren't there. So it looks like now that there's fur in front of those ears. Then doing it again over here. And it takes a bit of practice, but it really works. And you don't really need to have masking fluid. You don't need to use it if you don't like it. So the eyes, because this is a practice painting, I did one eye dry and the other eye, I did it more wet. And I wanted to see what would work better for me. And so when you're doing practice paintings, try not to worry too much about the outcome. Try to worry about how you're going to deal with it if you don't like it. And these eyes, I started with the blue because they have a little bit of blue around the rim, and the pupil is absolutely humongous. It's not like your typical cat pupil where it's an oval shape. So I want to try to capture that. So as I said, one side's drier and one side's got more water. And I needed something in those sockets because they were kind of giving me the creeps. And there's the large pupils. And then I'm just going to leave them alone and carry on with the rest of the painting. So around this kitty, I wanted it to have those soft muted colors that this cat has all over its body. So I took that dusty rose color that I mixed, and I'm using that brush to pull that color into the cat and thereby making fur. It's so simple. You see, I did it in less than 30 seconds. So if you can get your hand on one of these brushes, they really come in handy, because you'd have to do that with one single brush if that's the result you wanted, and that's kind of tedious to me. And just dropping in all the colors that are in the cat, like a little bit of the gray, tiny little bit of the brown, just tiny little droplets, and making sure they soften out. And around the paw, I am adding some cooler gray. I added more indigo, as you saw, just for shadows, because I want to make sure the cat doesn't look like it's floating in air. And around that paw as well, because the second paw that I drew, it's not in the photo, I just put it there, is underneath that first paw in the front. So I just needed a little bit of a shadow on it. And they're not done. I will do more, paint more on them, but just for now I'm establishing the shadows. Now I'm putting a bit of shape to those eyes, so it looks like the cat's looking up at us a little bit, because it looked a little stunned the way I had painted it. But that, I always go in at the end with a darker color on the top, at least a top quarter of the eye, because there's always a shadow caused by the eyelid. Okay, so here I'm back to that brush. So this is making fur type strokes, like yeah, it looks like fur. And I'm also trying to give it a little bit of shape. So it's with color, I'm adding some shadow so that the paws look a little more rounded. And with the dusty rose, I'm doing the same thing I did on the bottom. I'm going to be dragging in with that fun brush towards the cat's head, and now it looks like there's white fur against the background. So you paint, that's negative painting. And onto the fur, I'm adding very watery Jaune Brilliant just to add a little bit of movement to the fur. And under the chin, just a tiny bit of that cool gray color, just to add a bit of a shadow. So you can tell the difference between the face and the chest area, ever so slightly. Now these eyes bled a little bit and they didn't, I don't want any specifically, I don't want any really sharp lines, but I do want the eyes to stand out because that's what stands out in the photo to me, how soft this cat is. And those eyes just stand right out. So I'm tidying them up, the whites of the eyes, with some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, it's called. And I think that helped a lot. And then I put the little glint in their eye, in her eyes, and that just makes the world of difference. So I start doing painting in the whiskers, white, and then I go to the gray color. And it kind of helps the whiskers show up if you do both colors. Now, this is the cat I used the masking fluid on. If you look at the ears, you can see how thin I managed to get those hairs. And the whiskers, I'm adding a little bit of gray underneath some of the whiskers, underneath the whites, so they stand out more. And I also extend the whiskers and I make that part darker so that you can see it in the white fur. And then I take a wet brush and I soften it. I just kind of scrub it back and forth, not to remove paint, but to spread it out a little bit. So here they are side by side. I like a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, and that's how it goes when you're practicing. And as always, at the very end, I'm fiddling and finessing, I like to call it. And I could just do this all day long. The cat that had the masking fluid needed a little bit of work. I found the eyes looked a little bit, there was no depth. So now I'm adding in a little bit of darkness around the eyes. So they look like they're more recessed, as they should. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I really am going to go back to painting more animals because it's really what I love to do. I really love painting them. They're so sweet. Even a ferocious animal can look sweet in a painting. So I hope you give this video, I hope you give this project a try. If you liked it, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I'd be happy to hear from you too in the comment section. Happy watercoloring. Bye-bye.